Good evening, students. Welcome to my class on comparative politics. Okay, POL 2260. And today's discussion is on states. State. We're going to see different elements of states to understand. So, for example, if I say car, there are different types of cars, right? There's a Ford model, there's Tesla, right? And if you go inside the car, it's a different car. What do you mean different car? Well, there could be an IC engine, internal combustion engine, right, based on petroleum, and there's battery operated car like Teslas. So we going to see states and go into them and see how they are different, why they are different. Okay, so let's start with first to understand what states mean. State, S-T-A-T-E. What does that mean? Immediately, for those who don't know political science or comparative politics, will think of, like New York State. Yes, New York State is a state, but in international relations and comparative politics, when you say state, you're talking about a country, like a large country, but country has much more than a state. I'll come to it. State means it's an organization. That's the first point. It's an organization which has monopoly to use force or violence within its boundary. What does that mean? Monopoly, you know what monopoly means. It is the sole single body which can do it. So if a company's monopoly is in selling apples, that's the only company that can sell apples, and no other company. Other companies can sell mangoes, but monopoly company of apple will sell apples. Okay, and similarly, a state is an organization which has monopoly in using force or violence. So let me break it down further. Like in United States is a state, and it can use force inside. Say if there's a terrorist attack, like 9/11 happened, who do you think took charge? Yes, the federal government. Yes, the local state also did help people to get out. Fire department, police department, hurried to the 9/11 location, right? The Twin Tower location. But also the federal government stepped up and closed air traffic. So no planes could be on air. And there was another plane which was flying towards DC. And we don't know the target was White House or Congress building. But Dick Cheney approved for the military to take it down if it is coming. So the state has the monopoly. Can you and I authorize? No, only a state. Then you might think, okay, so Dick Cheney was a vice president. You're saying vice president is the state? No. He's government. He's government. Wait with me. In 5 to 10 minutes, I will explain what state is, what regime is, what a government is. Okay? A state, just the first point is, it has the monopoly to use force within its boundary, also outside if there's an external threat. Remember the social contract from previous lecture? External threat comes also, they could use their military. So United States uses its military to kill its enemies around the world. Like Soleimani of Iran was killed by Trump's order outside in United States soil. So it has the monopoly to use force. Okay, that's one. Second point is it has multiple institutions. Military is not the only institution. It has other institutions like judiciary. Okay, it has taxation institution. IRS collects taxes. Similarly, state government collects taxes. If you live in New York City also collects taxes. 3 different types, levels of government, right? And so they all have the authority to collect taxes so that they could create public goods like national security, or in New York City like a park, or picking your trash, or in a state, unemployment benefits. So many things are based on your tax revenue. So they are doing that. Those are institutions. What is the Supreme Court or judicial system? To deliver justice. To deliver justice. You want fairness. Your neighbor dog came and bitch, God forbid, one of your family member. You could take them to court and justice could be delivered by a system. So state has that. Institutions, multiple institutions apart from just military. Okay? And because it has so many of these institutions, it's highly institutionalized. That's the third point. You could write it as it's highly institutionalized, the state is. Okay? And fourth one, it's sovereign. Sovereign means reign, R-E-G-N, right? It rules. It has the power inside the state, inside the boundary. Okay, state is more physical. You could touch it. This institution, you could go to Supreme Court, you could touch it. Why am I saying about tangible and intangible? I'll show you the difference. Bear with me. That you go to Supreme Court, you could touch it. This is marble columns. And you could go to IRS, you could touch the building. You could go to Congress. You could go to the White House. And you could go to NYPD. You could touch it. It's tangible. You could see it. And whereas the next one is regime, write it down. So you learn this nuts and bolts, then you understand different things like different cars. You're going to understand different states. So regime, R-E-G-I-M-E, regime. What is a regime? Regime means it's nothing but it has norms or values. Norms. Norms means like norms approved by the public. So values of like equality. A good example of regime is the US Constitution. Okay? US Constitution tells how our government should function. Let me put it in another way. You go and buy a headphones. Excuse me. And you have an operating manual with it. It shows you how to operate, even though it's so simple. Right? Headphones, just turn it on, you know where to charge. It's only a couple of operations, but it comes with a manual. Similarly, a government, which is a much more complex, and you need a blueprint to operate it. That's the US Constitution. And it has norms and values. So if you read the preamble of the US Constitution, it talks about we the people, the first three words, to deliver justice. Justice is there. To create a security, common security for all of us is there in the preamble. All these are values of the society that is putting forth in a document so that the government could operate based on that. You with me? Okay. I'm coughing not because I'm sick or anything, because of the cooking there. Okay. And when I talk about regime is not as much institutionalized as state, but moderately institutionalized. It could be changed. What do you mean it could be changed? Like the US Constitution, if a dictator takes over the United States, for example, say, he could overthrow the Constitution. It's a paper, and he doesn't need to go by the division of powers. He could be the sole authority, a dictator. That is completely a change in regime. Are you following? Many countries have gone through that. Many countries have gone through that. Right after Revolution, the French Revolution overthrew the monarchy and created a French Republic. Okay? Are you following me? Similarly, it could be divided basically, the regime, to be either democratic or authoritarian. Democratic means, you know what democratic means? Democracy. Demo means people, cracy means ruled by the people. Democracy. Authoritarian means absolute power. He doesn't need the consent of the governed. An authoritarian good example is Putin. Yeah. Or Assad of Syria. He doesn't need the consent of the governed. In fact, he is killing his own freaking people. So A democracy, somebody who is in the top, who is governing, he needs the consent of the governed. The people give consent through voting, and through that they rule. So regime could be two types in basically authoritarian, but we're going to talk about authoritarian regimes, and I'm going to talk about different types even in that. But as of now, it's like a petrol car using or a battery car. So authoritarian or democratic. Are you following? Okay. And then it's often embedded in a constitution. It's often embedded in a constitution what a regime is. That's the fourth point. So it's embedded in a constitution means the US, not all democracies have constitutions. For example, US have constitution, India has a constitution, Japan has constitution, but not all democracies have a constitution. Israel doesn't have a constitution. It's a democracy. Are you following? So it's usually embedded in a constitution. That is the blueprint, the paper saying, hey, this is how you operate the machinery of, these are the rules. You could change it. Some give the provision to change the constitution, some don't. All right. Next, third one, government. Okay, government. First one is state. Second one is regime. Third one is government. Government, when I say that is, remember Dick Cheney? He's part of the government. Okay, government is the least institutionalized. And write that down, one point. Second point is government is restrained based on the regime. So if a regime is democratic, then the government is going to be democratic government. And it will determine the period, how long the government could be in power. So for example, the Constitution was, I'm talking about US Constitution, was was the change amendment which was done when FDR left the office and Truman was in there for a 2-term. Before that, FDR was there for 4 terms. 4 terms he was elected. So then now presidents cannot be in that office even if they want, even if people want more than 2 terms. Well, if people want, they have to change the Constitution. 2 terms. So it restricts the government. And government are weakly institutionalized, and also they're often elected officials. Okay? Not necessarily, because Putin, even though he's an elected official, he's not ruling through consent of the government. I'll come to Putin and other authoritarian governments. A monarch could be a part of the government. A monarch, like in Saudi Arabia, the king is the one governing. He's the part of the government, head of the government. Okay? He's not elected. We'll talk about it. And Japan has a monarch. UK has a monarch or queen, right? So now you understand state, regime, and government. And so if I have to give you a simple analogy, by the way, you could make it like a triangle. Here is state, here is regime, here is government, and this way it is highly institutionalized, here as it goes is lowly institutionalized. Okay? Now, institutions, you know what an institution is, right? Organizations, right? Baruch is an educational institution. We talked about institution in the previous lecture. So highly institutionalized when you go down. I'll give you a simple analogy that will keep you in your mind easily for you to understand state regime. A state is like the hardware of the computer. Remember I told you to touch and feel. You could touch a monitor. You could touch a central processing unit, which is hidden inside a computer, right? Keyboard, where you put the input to the computer. All this are hardware. And this is the hardware, the institutions, okay, of the state. It's the state. And then regime is the software which runs the computer. Are you following? So software has to be, you can't touch the software. Software is encoded into it. It's intangible. You can't touch it, but it runs the computer, just like the Constitution runs the US government. And the third one is the government, which is the guy, you and me, who comes and operates the computer. So we operate. Men may come, men may go, Lord Tennyson's poem. that we come and operate the computer, but we go away and another person will come and operate the computer. It changes. It's not permanent. Whereas software also could be updated. Have you seen? You bought an Apple, it'll be like, oh, there's an update in software, change it constantly, like 13.0, 14.0. I can't even keep up. They're just constantly changing a bug and updating the software. So software gets changed. This gets changed very easily. This gets changed. So imagine it's a computer in a public library. The software gets changed, but the person operating come and go every 30 minutes is what they allow you, at least when I used to use the public library. So it's like that. It's just like that. Keep that in mind. Are you following me? So states, regime, and so when people if you're reading New York Times or Washington Post or anything, regime change operation, or what the US did a regime change operation in Iran. What is that? What regime change are they talking about? In 1950s, United States sent CIA to overthrow a freely elected leader, Mossadegh, prime minister of Iran. Why? We don't want to go into that now because we don't have time. Just an example to show you. And that created further problems. We're not going to discuss that either. Just to show. And the United States have done regime change operations around the world. And it's been good. Sometimes it has come to bite us in the back. But understand, regime change can happen by external actors or even actors from the own state through revolution. Like you can go back to United States old July 4th, 1776. The regime was, the monarch was ruling us, right, from England. And King George, we didn't want him. So the founding fathers wrote a Declaration of Independence and fought a war, a revolution, American Revolution, and changed by writing a new constitution. A regime change happened. So actors inside could change it. Or like the example I gave in Iran and Guatemala, we overthrew a freely elected leader, so that, and in Chile and many places we have done to regime change. That is regime change. That's not state change. Can a state be completely changed, abolished? Yeah, Prussia was a part of World War II. After World War II, Prussia was a state eliminated from the map. But rare, it's highly institutionalized. Governments like that could be thrown. Elections change government. Winston Churchill won the World War II for the British, but then he was voted out of office. His opposite party came to power right after World War II. People didn't even give him a credit for that. He felt, I didn't want to go into the details of how he felt and his wife, but that is to show you an example. People change governments faster. Regime change, not so fast. Change of states, very rare. Okay, now let's move on to, I told you democracy, the consent of the governed is essential to govern. Okay, in authoritarianship, it is through coercion, force, domination is how they rule. Like Hitler. Okay, it's not through consent, it's through sheer will of domination. Where did this states came from? This idea of states, because we talked about hunter-gatherers, you're watching the documentary to understand, and where modern state idea is a Western idea, came from 1648. Write it down. Treaty of Westphalia. Treaty of Westphalia happened in Europe after Europe, you know how to spell Westphalia. Westphalia. Okay, it's after many years of war, the European powers came together and said, let's draw land, borders, international borders. So I won't come and mess with you inside your border. Whatever you do, you have the power. Whatever type of education you want to have, whatever type of how to manage your people, govern your people, everything is complete sovereign power. Similarly, don't come and mind in my business. It's like sovereignty was created, the idea of sovereignty. Okay? And so it's from Treaty of Westphalia. Now, what's the purpose of states? By the way, but if you look at historically, states have been there even in China way before 1648, okay? Because the rule of king and recruitment to their civil service, China had it all. I'm talking about in the West, the Treaty of Westphalia. So what is the advantage of states? Oh, many things. Because of states, it created, write down, first one, domestic stability. It created domestic stability because otherwise it's constant war. War created the state created the war. Remember the previous class I mentioned a quote? So because of war, because of creating states, the people, now going back to social contract, give some liberties, give away some of the liberties so that government will give in exchange security. Yes. So domestic stability, no, your neighbor can't kill you because the cops will come and get him. So that, and oh no, the person from outside the country won't come and war with you because you have a military to protect you. So there's a domestic stability. And also, it increases technological innovation. That's the second point. Technological innovations. For example, China, I told you, modern state, created gunpowder. Yeah, they created gunpowder, paper, all those were later taken and harnessed by the Western European powers through guns. That's why you're watching Guns, Germs, Steel by Jared Diamond. Okay? And how the West used it to colonize around the world. What are the advantages they used? So technological innovations, internet happened in America. It was funded by the government. Did you know that? Yeah. And you know how many billionaires are created, including Jeff Bezos, and how many millionaires. It creates more millionaires per year than any other field put together. Internet. So it's government's technological advance. Nuclear weapons also is funded and created by the US government. $2 billion right during the World War II. 9 countries now have it, the nuclear weapon. And it's technological advancement. All these things are supplied by the government, okay, funded, and including COVID vaccine given free to people in the Western countries because the government funded it, okay? So technological innovation states, you and I cannot fund such a process. Nobody has that kind of money, okay? You wouldn't even believe the richest man, billionaire Jeff Bezos' money won't be enough to wage a war in Afghanistan. Probably a few months of gasoline is $120 billion will run out. It costs trillions of dollars, $1 trillion national security budget a year in the United States. That's right. So no individual can do it. States give you the protection and they create the technological innovation so that domestic stability, technological innovation. Third one, economic growth. It creates, I told you already the example, internet alone creates so many, the Silicon Valley, Facebook, okay, created billionaire Mark Zuckerberg. If there's no internet, there's no Facebook. If there's no internet, there's no Amazon. Internet, okay, through that states help fund, and in those times, 19th century, trains. Yeah, there's the first millionaire, Vanderbilt, but the US government gave money, land for train tracks. So you following? With private and public partnership, economic growth improves the welfare of the people. Welfare of the people. Okay, so that's what states. Now, we're going to discuss some concepts. Write down legitimacy. 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 Now, what is legitimacy means? You all have used this word. Maybe you're having a hard time to define it. You know, if you try to go and sell an iPhone to your friend, and he's like, "Is it really legit?" Yeah, man, it's legit. What is that? Huh? It is authentic, right? It's widely accepted. Legitimacy in terms of a state, a state, because there are so many states in the world, right? And 193 states. You want to know whether the state has a legitimacy. How do you go about defining legitimacy? A legitimacy is widely accepted and recognized by the public. It's widely recognized and accepted by the public. So, for example, when a state was created, when a state is created every time, like Israel was created in 1948, right? The modern state of Israel. It needs recognition. Who recognized it first? Other countries have to recognize it. And United States recognized it first. Harry Truman was recognized. He was lobbied by his friend when they used to have a clothing store together. He came and lobbied. And then an Israeli delegate came and met the Truman, and Truman recognized the state of Israel. Are you following? Legitimacy. And then Soviet Union recognized, the two big powers recognized during that Cold War time. And so then one by one other states recognize. But there are other states which didn't recognize many of the Arab countries. Are you following? So, and legitimacy, second point is it confers authority and power. If you have legitimacy, it gives power and authority. Otherwise, no. There are different types of legitimacy. When I talk about that, you will understand, you'll get a better understanding of legitimacy. Keep with it. It relies on consent. Third point, legitimacy needs consent. Consent of who? So if someone says they are president of the United States, will you accept it? It has to be widely accepted that person has won the electoral college vote and ran for office and grabbed the power by winning the election. And that's approved. Even half of the country might hate him for his policy, or her. Hopefully in the future it will be a woman president. But consent, widely consent means what? Agree to it. And so it relies on consent. It's the third point for legitimacy. So let's talk about the three types of legitimacy. Then you will have a better understanding of what legitimacy is. The first one is traditional legitimacy. Traditional legitimacy is like a monarch. Example, a monarch has a traditional legitimacy. It is based on custom and tradition, okay? And a good example of a monarch based on tradition and custom is the Queen of England. She has legitimacy. She's the queen. And her family ancestors were kings and queens. You go back to 19th century, there was Queen Victoria. You go back 1,000 years ago, there's kings. Kingland, there's a tradition. And so because of that, they have a weightage. They have power. They have consent of the people of England. They're gathering to see the Queen. And they give the respect. Because of the legitimacy, the Queen, they used to have enormous powers, now not so much. Because Parliament the power has been switched to people. Little by little it eroded. You could talk about that for a whole class, but we don't have time. But this is an introductory course. From 1300 onward, slowly, Magna Carta, one by one, the power eroded from the monarchy to the prime minister and his office. Okay? That's a traditional legitimacy. But there's another form of legitimacy. By the way, traditional legitimacy is highly institutionalized. The monarchy is highly institutionalized. There are other monarchies, right? Saudi Arabia. That's the only country which is named after the family. Saud, Ibn Saud, S-A-U-D, Saud family. Saudi Arabia. It's Arabia. Saudi Arabia. Imagine you have your country named after you. Your family name. Saudi Arabia. And monarch of Japan. During World War II, Japan's monarch had the power, more than the prime minister. Now it's changing. It changed a lot right after the defeat of the Japan. Okay? The second one is charismatic legitimacy. Charismatic. Like you say, an actor is charismatic, right? What is a charisma, by the way? Anyone? Charisma, people usually confuse it with handsome. You don't need to be handsome to be charismatic. You could have both, but charisma is different from handsome. Charismatic means, it's a Greek word, charisma, grace of God, touched by God. So charismatic means based on their individual charisma, not based on tradition. His ancestors who had that office, so the king gets the office. No, by individual charisma, somebody takes it. It's a weakly institutionalized, okay? And a good example would be revolutionary heroes, not monarchs. They grab power through revolution, the passionate zeal, how they speak, how they look, talk. It could be Che Guevara, it could be Lenin, okay? It could be even Mao Zedong. They all are revolutionary heroes in China, Russia, Latin America, all these names I mentioned. And these guys have, through their force of their ideas, Lenin, force of ideas, communism. Mao Zedong is also. So is the guy Gandhi, charismatic legitimacy. He didn't have any office. He was not the Prime Minister of India. And he still lives in the memories of the people around the world because of his charismatic legitimacy as a leader of a nation which brought the British power to its knees. He didn't have mighty weapons. He had a loincloth. But through the power of ideas, the ideas he spoke, force of the ideas, made him a charismatic leader, charismatic legitimacy. Okay? Third one, write it down, is rational legitimacy. Rational legitimacy is a weak institutions. It's weak. Okay, it's a strong institution. I confused it with charismatic legitimacy. Rational legitimacy is a strong institution, but where did it come from? Rational or legal legitimacy? It comes from rules and norms. Like, good example is president or prime minister of countries. President of the United States, Biden, Joe Biden. Where does he get the legitimacy to push the button of nuclear weapons that could destroy? He would have under his control, not the governor of any state, not the even defense secretary, but only the president has the authorization to launch nuclear weapons which could destroy this earth multiple times over. Who gives him that power? Through the Constitution. Constitution didn't say anything about nuclear weapons, but the military and its control is with the President of the United States. So later development of nuclear weapons comes under his control. It's a rational legal legitimacy. Can somebody have both? Yes. Like Barack Obama had charismatic legitimacy, and I would say he had charismatic legitimacy and also rational and legal legitimacy as a president. Now, as a former president, he doesn't have the constitutional powers, but he has definitely legitimacy. That's why former presidents are taking the COVID shot to making people take the vaccine. People, if they could take, if he lives, I will take it. Yeah. Because the legitimacy of charismatic legitimacy. So rational legal legitimacy is usually based on the Constitution. It's a strong, okay? The weak one is the charismatic legitimacy. And examples of rational legal legitimacy are usually prime ministers, presidents of the country. Now, let's move on to the next ideas to talk about. Write down centralization or decentralization. What does that mean? It means you talk about state, right? Like state, like United States, state, UK, India, Israel, Russia, China, states. There's centralization of power and there's decentralization of power. Centralization of power means there's the federal government. So I'll give you an example of US because you live here and you understand it better. And then we will use that to talk about other countries as well. Centralization. The federal government here doesn't have all the powers. No. Who polices you? Like police. If you call 911, who comes? If you live in New York, NYPD. Is it say USPD? No. NYPD, the power of policing. So you go to public school, you think it is controlled completely by the federal government? No, states, New York City. Okay, I mean the governor, the mayor had power for a little while. Now the governor has it in New York State. So all powers are not with the federal government. So the United States is decentralized. Decentralized. And decentralized means not everything is within their control, and they give some of the powers to lower level government, state and city and municipals. Who cleans our trashes in the streets? Federal government? No. It's with the city, the employees. New York City sanitation, it says. They clean that. You following me? And they give those powers. Not all countries do that. Countries like India does it, decentralized. The federal government doesn't have all the powers. Some of the powers are given to states, just like America has states. India also has states. And if you go to Germany, it's called Länder. Instead of states, they give powers to the Länder. You go to Canada, they will call it provincial. Provinces. Different provinces, they give power. So they don't hold all the power. But there are some countries where they have unitary government. They have unitary states or states which have all the power with the central government. The local governments doesn't have much power. China is a good example. Everything is in the center, in the Beijing, not in local provinces. Go to another country, France, same case. And Japan, same. France and Japan are democratic. China is authoritarian. But you see, they have the commonality of unitary government. Taking power from the federal government and giving it to the local government is called devolution. Write it down, D-E-V-O, like evolution, put a D in front. Devolution. Power just goes down. Okay? And why do they do that? Oh, by the way, federalism means powers are distributed. There's a struggle for power. United States has struggled all the time. Well, look at this. COVID, CDC said in Florida, it should give the vaccine to only people of certain age, above certain age group. But the governor decided to do it in a different way in Florida. State decide, even though federal government says something. And there's a lot of fights. I could go on list. Marijuana is legal in some states. The federal government still doesn't legalize it. So it's a constant tug of war in federalism. Unitary states, what the federal government says, it has all the powers. Okay, but most of the countries around the world, devolution is happening. Why? Why is the power they're giving to local governments? First one, power closer to the people. Locally, if your local representative, you could go and talk to him or her and you feel assured. Even in the US, if the federalism, most people trust, like 70-80% trust the local governments. If you go to state governments, the trust erodes to like 45 or 50. Go to federal government, Congress, they're 18%. Congress has low trust. In fact, the opinion of Congress is a lower rating than cockroach in America. I'm not joking, serious. They don't trust it, federal government. So people want the powers to be closer to the people, so the devolution is happening. That's the first point. The second point is federal governments, central governments, we call in India central, the government in the capital have enormous problems to deal with because so many these days, from climate change, you name it, from transnational terrorism, all these problems. So they have already, they're full, their plate is. So they're giving other things like sanitation, please, you do it. Education, please, you do it. Okay, they're giving away those powers to local governments. Okay, the third reason is ethnic issues could be dealt effectively without conflict in a local level. Federal level, they don't handle it well. So the evolution is happening, more countries. 3 points. You follow it? If I ask in exam, what are the 3 reasons most countries are having devolution? You have to answer it. Next one. Let's talk, put a line in your notes. Let's talk about 3 important points. Okay? We were discussing all this to come to this, which is going to be very good. And with this, the lecture will be over. 3. Power. Write it down. Power, autonomy, capacity. 3 things. Now let's talk about power. What is power? Okay? We talked about politics and what power is. Extending your will. Very good. Remember from previous class? Now, power in a state means what? There's a state has a strong state and a weak state. There are strong states and weak states. How do you say some states are weak states? Well, you know what a state's definition is, and they have highly institutionalized, but a weak state means it's weak institutions. It doesn't have a proper government, functioning government. Okay, that's a weak institutions. It doesn't have a proper authority. It doesn't have a proper legitimacy from its people. You go to Afghanistan. One of the problems is the power of the federal government doesn't extend to all the regions in America. So like in America, I will give you an analogy. This is written by a scholar studying Afghanistan. It's like American cheese. Everywhere uniformly, the power is distributed. Afghanistan is like Swiss cheese, holes. There are pockets. Where pockets, the federal government power doesn't help. That has to be a local warlord. He will have the power. In the mountain region, the federal government military cannot go in. That guys have the power. Even in Pakistan, it's a weak state because even the Pakistan military cannot go and do things in all places. So these are weak states. So power and authority are weak, and it's weakly institutionalized are weak states. Okay, you understand power. Let's talk about authority. Let's talk about capacity. Capacity is to wield power to carry out security. Right? Security is the important role of the government to protect you. Remember the social contract? You give away your civil liberties, and so that the government protects you from inside and outside threat. So to wield power, a government capacity is its ability to wield power to protect its citizens, security reasons, and reconcile between freedom and equality. So do they want to tax the rich and give more money to homeless and poor people, programs that will help them? That is to create equality. Or you're free to make how much money you want. Just America is highly free society, very free society. It's less equality. One of the most unequal societies in the world, America is. Yeah, South Africa is the most unequal society in the world. It's one of the unequal societies. You have billionaires and there's homeless people out of them. And people lost their jobs standing in lines for food during COVID crisis in cars. And there are billionaires who make more money. So you have high freedom, low equality. And the government decides to balance it or not. Okay? So if you balance one, the other one will go down. It's like seesaw. Okay? So that is the capacity. What about autonomy? What's autonomy? Autonomy is same to wield power. We already talked about power, what power is. To wield power independently. Government independently can do it. The central government, the federal government can do what they want to do. Any programs, policies they want to do, they could do it without intervention from outside actors, like international actors. That means other states telling you what to do and you have to listen to them. Or intervention from inside, like in the US, it's autonomy of the federal government is we have checks and balances. the president wants to build a wall, or say Trump wants to deport people, and some other states and cities says, oh no, we are going to give sanctuary cities. So that's the conflict between states, cities, and the federal government policy. So federal government in the United States does not have full autonomy to do what it wants to do. Are you following? Autonomy is the ability to do, willpower to do what they want to do, execute their policy without intervention from external actor or internal actors, other political actors like local governments, state governments. You with me? Okay. Now I'm going to draw a table and explain something, and we are done with the lecture. But this is important. Keep in mind, I'm going to draw like a 4x4 so it's easy for you. Okay. High autonomy. Okay. High capacity. Low autonomy. Are you following me? Low capacity. High autonomy, low autonomy, high capacity, low capacity. Okay. So now let's see a country which has high autonomy and high capacity. A good example is China. You know what autonomy and capacity is. So China has the capacity to do, it has resources, okay? And it has the autonomy, which means there's no actors from outside can tell China what to do inside. And all the power is with the federal government. Remember, the central government in Beijing, the local actors are not going to stop them. China wants to build, the central government wants to build a bridge in 2 months through a neighborhood. They will remove the neighborhood and build it. That's high autonomy and high capacity. And China is a good example. There's danger. There's danger for it. What's the drawback or danger? It affects individual liberties. So if China wants to do that through a neighborhood, and it'll remove all the homes of people living there for decades or even generations, they could do that. Not in America. You think you could destroy a neighborhood easily? Yeah, there's one guy who did that historically in America, power broker Robert Moses. You have to read his book. But that's rare. Most people cannot do it because there will be fight, struggle, so it doesn't get done in America. But the Chinese have the power. The government has the power. Low autonomy, high capacity. What do you mean low autonomy? Low autonomy means they have limited autonomy. They will have struggle. They have capacity. They have resources, willpower to do things. Resources. United States has the high capacity to do things, but low autonomy, not because somebody from outside is telling us, but inside. The danger of it is, I'll tell you now, disadvantage or danger. Like, for example, when the country faces a new type of threat, immediately to handle it will be hard. COVID virus spread like a wildfire in the United States. Why do you think? Because the government cannot mandate masks. There's a highly freedom-loving people here, and that is good in one way, but it's also bad because many don't want to wear masks. Some countries, you say, they will arrest you or they will fine you enormously. You can't do that here. And so that's the danger of it, high capacity, low autonomy. Are you with me? And what about low autonomy, low capacity? Low in both. Many other sub-Saharan African countries, sub-Saharan African, that means countries in Africa which are below Sahara. Sahara is in the northern region of Africa. So poor countries doesn't have any capacity and low autonomy as well, because outside countries will tell them what to do. Why? Because they have borrowed money from a lot of these countries, IMF and others. They tell them what to do. These countries, their institutions are already weak. They could even, the danger is they could fail, like a failed state. Yeah, failed state. Somalia was a failed state for a long time. And Afghanistan in 2001, 9/11 happened, was a failed state. So it could fail. That's the danger here. Now, high autonomy, low capacity. Low capacity and high autonomy is Russia. Russia has low capacity, okay, but high autonomy. The central government has the power. Remember, unitary states we talked about? Russia is one of the examples. Putin can do what he wants inside his country, but it has lower capacity. And what's the problem with the lower capacity and higher autonomy? Development, the danger is development, disadvantage or danger is development, economic development is obstructed because they have low capacity. And that lower economic development, state has to provide stability, economic development. Remember the 3 points? If economic development is affected, it could create unrest. People will feel restless, and it could create revolution or internal strife. That's the struggle. That's the disadvantage. Okay? So now you followed with me throughout this course, this lecture. We started with states. We learned about regime and government, right? We talked about different aspects of the states, what state does and improve. And we talked about capacity, autonomy, power. We talked about legitimacy, the 3 different types of legitimacy. We talked about centralization and decentralization. And we talked about centralization and decentralization. Study that. And we talked about what are the 3 reasons more countries are adapting to devolution, so to become more federalist system. Now, next class, I'm going to talk to you more about ethnicity, national identity, all those things. Until then, keep learning. Good luck.